folks at Kairos. What I'm going to do is go really quickly through what we've done the past couple of days in AP biology as quickly and as succinctly as I can. First up, yesterday, we did a little energy and enzymes review. We introduced photosynthesis. Today we're talking about a very specific part of photosynthesis called the light reactions. These 4 questions, they filled out in their notebooks yesterday, so you can pause, fill these out if you haven't. I'm going to check these for points, and then you can move on. First thing we introduced was photosynthesis. Although there are a lot of different types of organisms, cyanobacteria, algae, that do photosynthesis, when you look out into the courtyard, when you look out into a forest on land, mostly what you're seeing are plants. Right here, we're just going to highlight, well, where in the plant is photosynthesis actually occurring? Well, in the tree, in the leaf, in a plant cell are these structures called chloroplasts. It's in the chloroplast that photosynthesis occurs. If you notice, not all of the cell is even green. So you look at a tree and you see the green leaves. You look at the leaf, it almost all looks green. But when you zoom in on a cell in the microscope, most of it's clear, and only the chloroplasts are green. If you zoom in on a chloroplast, most of it's clear, but only these little areas around these little circular little sac structures look like these little structures that look like a pancake. That's what's green. Well, what are the major structures I need to know about in a chloroplast? Well, first, I need to know these things have a double membrane. They have an outer membrane and an inner membrane. I need to know that this inside space around all these pancakes is called the stroma. Each pancake is called a thylakoid. The space in the thylakoid, the space in the pancake is called the thylakoid space. And then a stack of pancakes has a special name called a gram. Great, so let's take a look at the overview of photosynthesis. What's going on in the big picture of photosynthesis? Well, the first thing is there's 2 biochemical pathways, 2 sequences of steps run by enzymes, the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. The light reactions happen on the thylakoid membrane. Calvin cycle happens in the stroma. Energy comes from light. The energy from light is transferred into two molecules. The energy from light goes into ATP. The energy from light is transferred into NADPH. Those are going to power the Calvin cycle. While this is occurring, the light reactions require water. They're going to split and break it apart, and they're going to generate oxygen. We'll talk about why later on today. But these 2, ATP and NADPH, they're going to power the Calvin cycle. Well, what's the point of the Calvin cycle? Well, the Calvin cycle is going to take the carbons from 6 carbon dioxide molecules. It's going to take the physical material, the physical carbons, join them together to make 2 sugar molecules called glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, G3P, and then the plant's going to take 2 glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate molecules and turn them into glucose. That's it. Okay, so that's all for that. That's the overview of photosynthesis. Well, let's get into the nitty-gritties of this story of photosynthesis. The first part of the story is, well, where the heck did the light come from in the first place? The light that's going to power the whole thing. Well, the light comes from the sun. And where is this energy released? Where is it being released and then brought forth? Well, it happens in the core of the sun. In the core of the sun, there are these things called nuclear fusion reactions. Fusion, what's that? It's 2 things being joined together. Nuclear, referring to the nucleus of an atom. Nucleus of an atom, 2 nuclei are fused together. And that's going to generate new elements and also release a crap ton of energy. The one that powers the sun is when a hydrogen nucleus is fused with another hydrogen nucleus, generating a helium nucleus, which is going to release a crap ton of energy. Just to get the numbers here, hydrogen has 1 proton. The other hydrogen has 1 proton. I add them together, I get a nucleus with 2 protons, and that's a helium nucleus. It releases a crap ton of energy. And all that energy bounces from particle to particle around inside the sun. When it finally hits the surface, a photon of light pops out of the sun and fires towards Earth. It takes 100,000 years for that energy that got released to bounce from particle to particle inside the sun. Once the photon gets emitted, it only takes it 8.5 minutes to get here. What does that mean? It means when you look at the sun, what you're seeing is what occurred 8.5 minutes ago. You're seeing the sun as it was 8.5 minutes ago, not as it is right this moment. And the first time I got an idea about this type of an idea was, I was a kid, I think I was like 8 years old, and I was watching the 8th graders throw a baseball down, I was up on a hill, and the baseball field was off in the distance. And I saw a kid throw a ball, and another kid, and then I heard, whack. And then I saw the kid throw a ball, whack. And there was this delay of like 1.5 seconds between me seeing the ball hit the mitt and me hearing it. And I thought, why is that occurring? And it ends up being because light travels so fast, I'm seeing the glove close around the ball just a fraction of a second after it occurs. But then since sound only travels at 600 miles per hour, it took about 1.5 seconds for me to finally hear the smack of the sound. That's kind of how it is here. Whatever we see happening on the sun, that was 8.5 minutes ago. There are stars that are like 1,000 light years away. And what that means is when you look at the star tonight in the sky, what you're seeing is the star as it was 1,000 years ago, not the star as it is today.
Anywho, deep inside the center of the sun, a fusion reaction occurred, releasing energy that bounced around for 100,000 years.
Then it takes 8.5 minutes to get to Earth. That means that the light that's hitting my hand from outside the window, it originated as energy in the center of the sun, being released by a nuclear fusion reaction 100,000 years ago, before the energy finally hit my hand and warmed up the surface of my skin. That light, it's doing the same thing when it's hitting the leaves of those plants. Okay, we're going to focus in on the light reactions. Where are these occurring? Why they're happening right here on the thylakoid membrane. So for the rest of this, we're not going to be looking at this big picture of a chloroplast. We're going to zoom on this picture of one thylakoid. All right, as we're zooming in on this one thylakoid, we're going to look at a handful of structures. We've got photosystem 2. We've got a sequence of molecules called the electron transport chain. We've got photosystem 1. We've got an enzyme called NADP plus reductase. We got another enzyme called ATP synthase. And we're looking at one thylakoid, and inside we got the thylakoid space. Really quickly, before we move on to this picture, I want to look at one photosystem. So photosystem 2, and this is a picture of it, has a couple of major locations in it. In the very, very center of it is what we call the reaction center. There are 2 electrons in there. Over here on the sides, there are 4 panels. There's one in front that we've removed. There are all these, what we call pigment molecules. The green ones are chlorophyll. The yellow ones are like xanthophyll. The orange ones are carotenoids, which tend to be oranges and reds in color. But these pigment molecules, if you're wondering why do we have so many different ones, so many different colors, well, they reflect the color that they are. They don't absorb the color that they are. If you notice, they're each reflecting a different color, which means they're best at absorbing a different color of light. Why would the photosystem have a bunch of different pigments in it? It's because this gives it the ability to absorb a wider range of wavelengths of light so that the plant can utilize more of the sunlight's energy than it otherwise could. Well, what's the photosystem do? When light from the sun comes into the photosystem, it hits these pigment molecules. It'll get absorbed, and then it bounces from pigment to pigment and gets absorbed. It gets transferred into these electrons. The light will come in and it'll be absorbed, and it'll bounce from pigment molecule to pigment molecule until it ends up going in and being absorbed by these electrons. So what's going on with the photosystem is it's grabbing and absorbing the light energy, and it's transferring, funneling all that energy into these electrons. Let's shrink this down, get this out.
Shrink her down. Nope, I'm gonna delete that still. Shrink it down. All right.
So let's go through the basic steps of the light reactions. Step one. Step one, light's gonna come streaming in out of the sky from the sun, bringing energy that was released 100,000 years ago. The energy is gonna get absorbed by the photosystem, bounce around until it gets into the very, very center, and it's gonna be absorbed by an electron. The electron is gonna start to get more and more energized. It absorb energy, and it's like, and it gets more energy absorbed, and it gets more energy absorbed, The electron's gonna get so crazy. It's like, you can't hold me. Do you think you can contain me? It's going crazy with energy. Eventually, this little electron, that molecule over there looks a lot more attractive. It's like, you can't hold me anymore. And it jumps over, we lost the negative. It's gonna jump over to the first molecule of the electron transport chain. And it's gonna jump, this one's more attractive, and it's like, ooh, and then it jumps to the next one, and then it looks and it sees a more attractive one. Then it jumps to that one, and then it jumps over here. On the way, it's gonna dump off some energy to the center molecule, which ends up also being a proton pump. Now what proton pumps do is they pump protons. Where is it going to pump the protons? When it gets the energy from the electron, it's going to pump protons from the outside of the thylakoid into the thylakoid space. All right, great. We pump some into the thylakoid space, but what does that generate? What does that create for us? Well, what it creates for the plant is that as this keeps happening over and over again, the concentration of protons in the thylakoid is going to start to rise, and it's going to continue to rise. And the concentration of protons outside are going to continue to drop. And this is going to generate a concentration gradient. It's not just going to generate a concentration gradient. These have a positive charge, and the inside of this thylakoid is going to become more and more positively charged, and it's going to charge up like a battery. We are storing potential energy in the form of a proton concentration gradient. Now, if you remember from before break, where do protons like to go if they're allowed? They would like to exit. Is there a molecule on here that would allow them to go through? It would be ATP synthase. And as these go through, it requires 3 to go through. The ATP synthase molecule is going to rotate. Each one that goes through, it's going to coil up like a spring, and it's going to use that energy to take an ADP molecule, add a phosphate group to it, and turn it into ATP. So as a quick summary, the energy from light is charged up and energized an electron that's jumped across the electron transport chain, giving energy to a proton pump that pumps protons into the thylakoid membrane that generates a potential energy of a concentration gradient. Those protons, if they're allowed, will go through the ATP synthase molecule. For every 3 protons that go through, the ATP synthase molecule can make 1 ATP molecule out of it. So we've gotten the energy from light into these ATP molecules, but we still have to get them into NADPH. Well, how do we do that? Well, the light that came out of the sky and charged photosystem 2, it does the same thing to photosystem 1. And as this electron gets charged with energy, it eventually gets so energetic, it's like, you can't contain me. You can't hold on to me. And it sees this NADP plus reductase molecule and it thinks, oh, you look kind of nice. And it jumps. It jumps over to this NADP plus reductase molecule. If two electrons jump over onto this, they can accomplish something together. And in this process, these 2 electrons plus a proton plus NADP plus these 3 substances together, when they join forces, can give me an NADPH. Let's make that orange because it has the energy from the sun. NADPH. NADP plus reductase, what does it do? It's an enzyme that reduces NADP plus and turns it into NADPH. How many electrons does it take? It takes 2 electrons. It also takes a proton. 1 electron to make that a neutral charge, 1 electron to turn that into a hydrogen atom. Stick it on, we got NADP plus, or NADPH. We got one more problem though. This originally had 2 electrons, and when we lost an electron, we only had 1 electron. And if we lose a second electron, now we don't have any electrons. What's the problem? Well, the problem is there's no more electrons to energize. This whole system would shut down. We need a source of electrons. Well, where are we going to get our electrons from? We're going to get our electrons from the splitting of water. So when water splits, all right, 2 water molecules split, it's going to give me 4 protons plus 4 electrons plus 1 oxygen gas molecule. Or that's where the oxygen came from. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because we need a source of electrons to give 2 photosystem 2 so it doesn't run out. But there's a happy byproduct of this. The happy byproduct of all this is that, right, great, they do that, but they also make protons. So the number of protons in here goes up. All right, this is gonna, let's make it smaller. This is gonna cost the water molecule. All right, we're gonna blow up the water, generate protons, generate electrons for the photosystem, and in the process, we're gonna make an oxygen gas molecule. This is why photosynthesis makes oxygen. Not because it wants to, but because it needs electrons. Splits the water to get electrons, that's what it wants. It's just a happy accident that it all makes oxygen. That's the end of the notes for the day. Hope you guys had a great time at Kairos.